Good evening. Happy Emergency Preparedness Week, and welcome to our webinar on preparedness through connection. My name is Jennifer McClarty, and I manage the team behind PreparedBC, which is the province's official emergency preparedness education program. We're very grateful that you've taken time out of your day to join us. We know how busy people are, so it's greatly appreciated. Before we get underway, we have a few housekeeping items to cover to ensure that everyone gets the most out of tonight's session. First, for your awareness, all mics have been muted. This is to ensure everyone can clearly hear our presenters. If you have questions during the webinar, please use the Q&A function, which is located at the bottom of your screen. When the presentation is over, we'll circle back to answer as many questions as time allows. You can also connect with us anytime at preparedbc@gov.bc.ca. So if we don't get to your question tonight or something occurs to you later, you can always drop us a line. And finally, tonight's webinar is being recorded and will be posted to PreparedBC's YouTube channel for future reference or to share with friends and family. I'm privileged to be joined tonight by two subject matter experts who have graciously agreed to share their knowledge and experience with us. Stacey Barter is the Executive Director of Building Resilient Neighborhoods, a nonprofit organization focused on building community resilience by strengthening neighborly connections. She is also co-director of Hey Neighbor Collective that's focused on building social connectedness and resilience in multi-unit housing across BC. Stacey refers to herself as a serial community builder who has spent more than 25 years as a community developer and engagement specialist. She grew up in BC with strong roots in the Kootenays and now lives in Greater Victoria. Also joining us is Ksenia Stepkina, a community development practitioner, community engaged researcher, and grassroots organizer based in Kitsilano, Vancouver. Originally from a small town in Siberia, Ksenia brings a deep commitment to building a connected and caring community in a big city. She is the founder of Good Neighbor Kitsilano, a resident-led initiative that aims to nurture neighbor-to-neighbor connections and inspire grassroots action for more resilient neighborhoods. Anna Kazi from the PreparedBC team is here as well and will be working her moderation magic in the chat, tracking questions and addressing any issues. And last but not least, we have Sarah Coupé, who is with us from the Island Deaf and Hard of Hearing Center, and she will be providing American Sign Language interpretation during the webinar. To start us off in a good way, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that I am joining you from the unceded traditional territories of the Algonquin and Wasanic peoples on southern Vancouver Island. We have people joining from across the province tonight, so I welcome you to take time to acknowledge the lands you live on, and if you're comfortable, share those acknowledgements in the chat. The intent of tonight's webinar is to introduce the concept of preparedness through connection, what it is and why we're talking about it now. We'll be hearing from Stacey and Ksenia as experts in the space, drawing from both research and real-life examples. We also hope to inspire you for how you can apply preparedness through connection in your own life. Traditionally, emergency preparedness has focused on 3 steps. The first is knowing your hazards. You need to understand the risks you face in order to properly prepare for them. For example, preparing for wildfires is going to look a lot different than preparing for earthquakes. The second step is making your plan. A home emergency plan says how you and the people you live with will respond during an emergency. I like to call this your peace of mind document. Knowing what to do, where to go, and who to contact will reduce stress and help keep you focused and safe. The third step is gathering supplies. In an emergency, you may be asked to evacuate or stay home. In both scenarios, services could be disrupted, so you'll need basic supplies for everyone in your household, including pets. While these are all critical steps and they will always be necessary, research and experience increasingly shows a fourth step may be the strongest indicator of preparedness, and that's the strength of social connection. When emergencies happen, the first help you receive will likely come from the people around you, like your neighbors or other community members. Establishing a strong sense of trust, belonging, and reciprocity before an emergency means people can rely on each other when one occurs. I'm now going to turn things over to Stacy to provide deeper insights into what research and lived experience is revealing about the importance of social connection and to walk us through real-life examples of the concept in action. Stacy, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jennifer. It's such an honor to be here, and I'm so excited to get to be here during Emergency Preparedness Week. So I'm just going to pull up my slides and get them started. Here we go. Great. Yeah, so I'm so thrilled to be here to talk about one of my absolutely favorite topics, which is how we can be more resilient through being more connected. And I am joining from my home on the traditional and unceded territories of the Lekwungen speaking peoples, the Kapsapsum and Songhees nations. And our team has been reflecting a lot lately on how we can learn more from Indigenous communities about community connection and certainly about resilience. So I really look forward to continuing my learning journey and really honor the nations where I live. So as Jennifer said, I work with a small not-for-profit organization called Building Resilient Neighborhoods. And the core of our work is really around this idea that community resilience starts with connected, prepared, and caring neighbors. And that if we have those things in place, we're going to have better footing with whatever comes our way. And as Jennifer mentioned, we also do this work in partnership with a larger collective in British Columbia called the Hey Neighbour Collective. We're very excited to work with a really wide array of partners who are engaged in efforts to strengthen social connectedness and resilience in multi-unit housing, where there can be, often unique challenges around connecting with our neighbors. So we're partnering with health authorities, housing operators, local governments, researchers, and really excited to be moving together towards trying to shift to more connected communities. So why neighborly connections as the foundation of community resilience and our work? Our team has been working for a very long time in community development, and we've been very curious about why it is that when things get tough, there's an emergency, a disaster, an economic downturn, why some communities fare better than others. And through our research, what we've found is that we often pay attention to physical aspects of communities, our physical infrastructure, but often it's the more invisible aspects of infrastructure, like social infrastructure, the social glue of communities that really makes a difference to being resilient. I grew up in a really small community in the Kootenays. I'm dating myself here with this photo. This is me at, I think, about age 5, maybe 4. And it was just part of the community's DNA to be neighborly, as it is in many small rural communities. So if my neighbors went away, of course I would take care of their pets. Or if the neighbor's livestock got out of the pen, of course the whole community would come and rally to herd them back home. And even now, my father this past couple of years, has been going through some medical challenges around surgery. And I'm so grateful to his neighbors who have been there every step of the way. In the winter, every day, bringing his firewood in for his wood stove. So it's this kind of neighborly care that can make such a difference with all kinds of different challenges and just our everyday lives. I wanted to share a couple of other stories and examples of different kinds of emergencies that I think neighborly connections can support. This story was shared with me with my through my colleague Molly Rose. She was doing some research for our Neighbors Helping Neighbors project, and she met Anne, who at the time was in her 90s and was sharing about the connection with her neighbors and how that made a difference for her and different health emergencies she had experienced. So in their building, one of Anne's neighbors every day would distribute newspapers on her floor. And she noticed one day that Anne had not gotten her newspaper. By about noon, she started to get concerned, knocked on the door, and found that Anne had fallen. And luckily, that neighbor was able to support her to get medical assistance. So knowing our neighbors, knowing to look out for each other can make such a difference in these kinds of events. Molly also shared this story of her mother, Nicola, who had taken time to get to know her neighbors in Victoria on her street, and including a young family on the street. One day, her neighbor got the call that I certainly have gotten before from daycare saying, "Oh, daycare is closed. Due to staff illness." Her neighbor needed to get to work, and luckily, because they had a relationship already, Nicola was able to step in and offer care for the day for her son. So knowing each other in advance and taking time to invest in these kind of neighborly relationships can help us with these everyday emergencies that come our way. It also, though, can be extremely important during bigger events. And I think particularly in BC in 2021, when we had the heat dome event, we had 619 deaths, tragic deaths here in the province. Most of them were older adults who lived alone. And I think this was really a wake-up call for many of us about the critical aspects of being isolated and the importance of social connection in being able to prevent deaths like this. So, socially connected communities, there's so many benefits to it. We know we're safer when we're socially connected, we're more prepared when we're socially connected, but also we're healthier. It has incredible benefits for our health, and then we're just happier when we're socially connected. So, married together, we think this is kind of a magic ingredient for being resilient. At the same time, I think there's more and more evidence, and many of us, having lived through the pandemic, really have woken up to how critical being socially connected is. We're understanding that more, but we're at a time in society when more and more people are lonely and more people are isolated. So in the United States, they've declared loneliness an epidemic. We see statistics in BC where 38% of British Columbians say they feel a strong sense of belonging in their communities, which is very positive. But that means that the other 62% do not feel that sense of belonging. And from a survey in 2021, 18.5% of people in BC reported always feeling lonely. So very, very concerning trends in terms of what's going on in society. We know this is important for being prepared, for being resilient to emergencies, but also it's really critical for our health and our well-being. We know that being connected socially is really protective for both physical and mental health. And conversely, being socially isolated or chronic loneliness can have very severe health impacts. One of the pieces of research that is often quoted is that this chronic loneliness and social isolation has been associated with damages to health that can be similar to smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. So very important impacts on our health and well-being. We were reflecting on this last year when we had a symposium with our Hey Neighbor collective partners, that when we started our work together in 2019 with the collective, people were very concerned about loneliness impacts on health. But now in 2025 and 2026, we're realizing it's not just about health and well-being. It's actually something that can be life-saving and really supports our resilience to all kinds of challenges, whether that be climate change, health, aging. It really makes a difference. So we like to think of this this social infrastructure, this social glue that I was talking about, sort of like muscles that we can intentionally build up. And if we are intentional about fostering social connections, those muscles will serve us when challenges come our way, whether that is an emergency or other different kinds of challenges. So I wanted to share a little bit about why we started our Connect and Prepare program in particular, which is really this intersection of social connections and emergency preparedness. We started it in 2017 with the City of Victoria's Emergency Management Division, Victoria Ready. And I want to give a huge shout out to the City of Victoria, who really have been ahead of the curve and trailblazers in recognizing how critical social connectedness is in being prepared. They've been huge partners and really, really advanced this work. And we started it in Victoria, but now we're just so thrilled that over the past several years, we've been able to take this model of Connect and Prepare, and we're working with many different communities across the province. You can see some of the logos here, different place-based community organizations, local governments, health authorities, housing operators, and we're now moved to a train the trainer approach where these local organizations are rolling out this approach in their communities. Good Neighbor Kitsilano and Ksenia, who's here to speak tonight, is one of our partners doing incredible work. So the idea of Connect and Prepare is really by building connections between neighbors, coming together to get prepared together rather than on our own, and really focusing on strengthening this culture of neighbors helping neighbors. That can make the difference for being a resilient community. There's all kinds of evidence to back this up, particularly in the world of disaster recovery. This is an article by a researcher in the United States, Daniel Aldrich, and the blog article was entitled Social Ties, Not Just Sandbags. And you can see the headline there, in disaster recovery, social networks matter more than bottled water and batteries. And so his research looked at the 2011 earthquake and tsunami in Japan. And what he discovered was, again, what we've suspected, that those communities that had stronger social ties fared much better in disaster recovery, and that factor was a critical factor in what made the difference for disaster recovery. He also researched the Kobe, Japan earthquake in 1995 and talked to many people. And I found this to be such a powerful quote that someone shared: if you knew where your neighbors slept, you knew where to dig in the rubble to find them early enough in the process to survive. So again, knowing our neighbors well enough can make the difference and be life-saving when emergencies come our way. And as Jennifer said at the beginning of the session, it truly is our neighbors who are often the first responders in emergencies. This is from Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Someone in Mississippi was sharing, to that point, we only knew 3 neighbors, but we soon realized we had to rely on everyone to survive. So again, the importance of knowing who's there and being there to support each other. Another research project looked at the heat wave in Chicago in 1995 and compared 2 different neighborhoods with very similar demographics, and again found the same trend, that in these 2 neighborhoods, the neighborhood that had strong social connections, strong social networks, the deaths were much lower, and the community that was not well connected, the deaths were 10 times higher than the other one. So the community that knew each other well, in that community, people were doing wellness checks, knocking on each other's doors, and they had a sense of who needed help, who might be aging, who might be sick, who might need support. So this has sort of become our tagline in Connect and Prepare, this idea that it's who is in your kit, not just what is in your kit. So when we think of emergencies, it's not just the supplies, but also the people that we can rely on. A lot of traditional emergency preparedness focuses on the short-term response to big events or getting prepared within our household, which of course is critical, but we think it's not enough. We need to be prepared in our own homes, but we also need to be prepared together. And by preparing together and getting more connected, we also get this benefit of not just being prepared for those big events, but again, being more resilient to other kinds of stresses that we might experience, whether that's food insecurity or health challenges, or some of those examples that we shared earlier. So I wanted to share just a little bit before I turn it over to Ksenia about how Connect and Prepare works and a few stories from the amazing communities that we've had the opportunity to work with. Really, Connect and Prepare brings together small groups of neighbors, so usually on a block or in an apartment building, or if it's in a rural community, in a sort of quadrant of the community. And through a series of workshops, the neighbors get more connected, identify what they're concerned about in terms of strengths, assets, and then plan what they want to do together to get more connected and prepared. So, assessing those strengths and vulnerabilities that they have together, getting inspired about what they might do together, and then planning action that they take together. So, some examples of projects or activities that neighbors have taken together that we've seen are things like neighbors skill sharing, knowing who's got what skills where you live, setting up shared emergency supplies rather than everyone having supplies just on their own, setting up buddy systems or things like that. I have a few examples. These are from some of our early pilots in Victoria. This was a street in Victoria. And as I said, they realized on their block that it was important to have supplies in their own homes, but there were certain things that they could share together. So they invested in a shared emergency kit that one of the neighbors was willing to store. They developed a block level plan of how they would work together in the case of emergencies. And then they have an annual block party where they review the plan, update the plan, and then in between, they're sure to have different social gatherings. So they stay connected with book clubs and potlucks and skills sharing amongst their neighbors. I think I saw one of our community champions from this incredible community on the webinar tonight. This again was our pilot in Victoria in the early days. So this was a building in Victoria that is for seniors with disabilities. And a couple of incredible residents there got interested in how they might develop more connections in the building and started doing coffee meetups in the lobby with neighbors. And I think through that process learned that there were many people in the building that were on low incomes and were struggling with food insecurity. So the first thing they did was they set up a partnership with a food distribution agency to bring healthy food into the building, so it wasn't such a challenge for people to get out of the building to access that. And through that experience, they got more confident and decided to participate in Connect and Prepare. And through that process, like the other community, they developed a shared emergency supply kit, but they also decided to do a project where they accessed a small grant to develop grab and go kits for all of the residents in the building and put those together as part of a fun social gathering together, knowing that not everyone could afford the grab and go kits themselves. We've seen incredible examples of this idea of a party with a purpose. So bringing neighbors together to celebrate, have fun, get to know each other, but also weaving in elements of emergency preparedness as part of the party. This is a community that didn't have a common space, but they got permission from their housing operator to take over their parking lot and set up fun areas to get to know each other and let their kids play. And then we've seen incredible examples of neighbors taking time to learn about each other's skills and do skill sharing. The bottom corner here is an example where one community discovered they had a retired fire chief in their community. So they were able to do some fire safety workshops, but also recognizing that everyone has something to offer. So learning what skills, what strengths different neighbors have can be so valuable in terms of knowing who to call on and how people can step in an emergency. We have an amazing partnership with BC Housing. We've been working in some of their directly managed sites with them. And in one of their buildings, they had had a fire. And there were many residents with disabilities who were, it had been quite impactful going through the fire. And so they decided they wanted to set up a system of having floor connectors. And so these are volunteer residents who really helped people know who lived on their floor and make sure that everyone on the floor had key information about emergencies and emergency protocols. They also co-designed these door hangers where neighbors could choose if they wanted to share information just at a glance, like how many pets I have, or do I have mobility concerns? What languages do I speak? Things that they wanted their neighbors to know in the event of an emergency. And they also developed a simple guide to emergency protocols so that everyone on the floor would have access and understanding of that. And what was incredible about these projects is, of course, everyone's getting more prepared for emergencies, but through the process of working together, they were strengthening their relationships as well. I think what we've seen over time is that there's sort of this continuum of social connectedness that often starting with light social connections, casual conversation can gradually lead to building up a community that's focused more on mutual support. And so we've been so thrilled to see how this has happened through the Connect and Prepare process and think it's so impactful. I'm sharing about this particular program that we run, but I also really want to reinforce if you don't have Connect and Prepare or a program similar in your community, there's things you can do right away. You don't need a formal program to get started. So simple things like finding a buddy or offering to be a buddy with a neighbor, just taking time to get to know your neighbors. If I could advise one thing for neighbors to do, it would be to set up a communication system so you can stay in touch with each other in the event of an emergency in particular. And then if you've got capacity and interest, taking the time to develop a shared plan together. These are things that anyone could do and you could start tomorrow. So just really encourage you to think about what might be an opportunity where you live. We have lots of resources about getting connected with your neighbors, and Jennifer at the end of the webinar will share a link to our website. Our general email address will be there as well. And please just welcome you to reach out if you're interested in learning more, or if we can share any of our resources with you. And with that, I'm also just so thrilled to pass the baton to Ksenia at Good Neighbor Kitsilano. As I mentioned, we've just had such a privilege of working with incredible organizations and informal groups across BC that are doing this work. And Good Neighbor Kitsilano is the poster child of this work. They're doing such incredible work. So Ksenia, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Stacy, for your generous introduction and setting the stage for who is in your kit and not what is in your kit. So I will be sharing some practical ideas and examples of how you can get connected with your neighbors and as a result, build preparedness together. But first off, I'm acknowledging that I am located right now on ancestral, traditional, and unceded lands of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. I'm a settler, an invited guest, and I come from Siberia, Russia, the land of Evenks and Trofalars, and this is where my story begins. I was born in a small town and not a rural community, but small urban community where we knew all of our neighbors. And this was my childhood and my reality. So that image on the right, that the beautiful vision of neighbors connecting and helping each other, that was how I grew up. I remember neighbors knocking on our door to borrow a cup of sugar or 100 rubles until the next payday. We would often ask our neighbors to borrow chairs when we had guests over for birthday parties. So that was how I grew up. Neighbors knew each other, we connected, and we had that shared feeling of community. But when I moved to Canada, to Vancouver, big city, the reality was very different. Independence, hyper independence, and people were disconnected. And really, that did not sit very well with me. So I really decided to take matters in my own hands and decided to reinstate the tradition that we did with my mom when I was growing up. So around holiday season, I baked a lot of cookies and started knocking on my neighbors' doors. I moved to that building just a few months prior, so it was a good opportunity to meet neighbors. And I have to say, not everyone, opened doors, or not everyone. I guess everyone was very surprised. Let's say that, to receive a knock on the door in the evening, but everyone did open the doors, and everyone was quite happy and appreciative. And we had lovely conversations. A few people invited us over. And that's how we started building connections in our own building, starting to get to know neighbors. And from then, this is how the neighbor connection started in our building. That inspired me to keep going and to share these possibilities with my neighborhood. But this is when COVID hit, the pandemic hit, and we realized that we really, really need each other. So community became the center of attention, and we also realized the limits of formal institutions and formal supports. At a time in our neighborhood, a social organization that supported seniors had to stop their services, their very crucial, essential services, and they entrusted us, volunteers, neighbors, to help other neighbors. So in the time of COVID, we were able to assist 80 seniors with grocery shopping, wellness checks, and just friendly conversations. So that really, for me, highlighted the importance of neighbors helping neighbors and knowing each other. And that made me ask some important questions that led me to bringing together other neighbors in our community. How well do people know their neighbors these days? Do we have someone to ask for help in times of need? And especially in emergencies, how well are we prepared for emergencies together? And the next step was me bringing together other passionate neighbors who also wanted to get to know their neighbors and connect and build strong community that is caring and resilient. And we called ourselves Good Neighbor Kitsilano. That really speaks to the place-based nature of our initiative. And we're a group of neighbors, volunteers, grassroots that are on a mission to build more caring, connected, and resilient neighborhood by connecting with our neighbors. And we do have to say huge shout out to our community partners, Kitsilano Neighborhood House, who is supporting us in this initiative and providing space and other support, and our learning partners, Building Resilient Neighborhoods, of course, Stacy, and Tamarack Institute, which is a national organization. And even within that, we're quite unique because oftentimes initiatives like these are led by municipalities or social organizations, but we are true grassroots, volunteer-led, fueled by passion. And this is also my message to you, that you don't have to have a mandate from the government or be part of an organization. You can just be a neighbor, be a good neighbor. And we started connecting with the neighbors on our block, on our apartment, and within our apartment buildings or city blocks, through, we called it Block Connector Program. So similar to Block Watch, but really the goal is to build connection. So whether it's sharing information and resources, or just introducing ourselves, or creating neighborly socials, summer barbecues or winter hot chocolates at the lobby. Again, the goal is to get to know your neighbors. And in my building, I've been doing this for over 5 years. It was very slow start. Only a few neighbors showed up. But now over time, more and more folks are coming out and connecting. And I do have to say, we have that culture of neighborliness in our building. And next year, we were very interested in emergency preparedness. That was around the time of the heat waves and wildfires. So emergency preparedness was top of mind. This is where we started doing, started raising awareness and doing quite a bit of community outreach. to ask neighbors how well are they prepared, what resources may be needed, and also how are they connected with their neighbors, and do they see that the connection between the two. We organized grab and go bag workshops as a very tangible way to share very important information, how neighbors can prepare. But we also realized and recognized that these initiatives were really focused on individual preparedness. And as Stacy mentioned, it's great, but it's not enough. So this is where Connect and Prepare came in. So last year, 2025, we put a call out to residents of our neighborhood to come together to learn and to connect with their neighbors on their building, in their building, or in a city block. And we had support of Building Resilient Neighborhoods facilitator, and also had small funding from Tamarack and Gore Mutual Foundation, which allowed to make this possible. So over the course of 6 months, a group of residents came together to learn, to brainstorm, and to plan activities within our respective buildings or city blocks, and share ideas and learnings and challenges and successes. And we were really in that together. And we connected 7 city blocks and or multi-unit buildings in Kitsilano and Fairview neighborhoods through 12 block connectors. The training, resources, and a small $100 micro grants were provided to each block connector to put together either a party with a purpose or share resources, anything that they decided to do. So each project was uniquely tailored to the context of the building, because within some buildings there was a culture of connection and neighborliness. In some buildings or city blocks, that was brand new, so folks had to start from scratch. But the common goal was building trust and building awareness, whether it's just starting the conversation or developing a fully fledged neighbor-to-neighbor emergency preparedness plan. And I would like to share some of the examples of what our block connectors have done, and with the hope that that will spark some ideas and inspiration for you to connect with your neighbors. So the first case study is our own building. Myself and my co-connector, Verdella, we reached out to our neighbors to create a contact list. As Stacy mentioned, connections and knowing who lives in your building is very, very important. And even though we knew the names of people, in emergency, really, it is important to know how many people live in an apartment, what special needs they may have in case of emergency, and also what skills or resources they may be able to contribute. Maybe it's a first aid training, or they have a power generator. So in case of emergency, this information becomes very critical. And of course, we did it through connecting together, coming together on a beautiful summer evening and sharing resources from PreparedBC, thank you, and had great conversations. And the next step, we are considering building a shared emergency preparedness storage and resources. Lynn and Grace, our amazing connectors, they connected with folks at senior affordable housing that had 15 units, so quite small. So they didn't live there, but they really were passionate about supporting this building, the residents of this building, because there were quite a few residents with disabilities, a lot of elderly folks who are very extremely vulnerable in case of emergencies. And the first step they did is also Canada Day social, and they were actually asking people, what is important to you? What kind of questions do you have? What are your priorities? Recognizing that they don't live in this building, so they have to make sure they respect the wishes of those who do. And interestingly, that in this building, there was a history of interpersonal conflict because it's a small building, but a few residents admitted that even though they really didn't like their neighbors and wouldn't even talk to them, but in case of emergency, they would not blink an eye and they would help them. So I think this is very important that oftentimes we think we have to be best friends with our neighbors, but that's not the case. Really, connections, even that are not that deep, that really could help in case of emergency. So in that case, we're all in that together. And Anna and Sheila, and I believe Sheila is today on the call. Hello. Their building has been connecting for a number of years as well. So it was quite easy for them to bring neighbors together, to share resources, and create contact lists. And they were also able to update the fire safety plan. So one of the other learnings that came out of our experience and experimenting is that really buildings that have been connecting, it was much easier for them to start the conversation around emergency preparedness and work together. So really connections became that foundation. Anne, she lives in a single family home, and her block organizes block parties. So this year, she put together a block party, and over 50 addresses came to the party. And there was music, activities for children, and her husband demonstrated a grab and go bag and what goes into it and how to assemble one with using humor and funny stories. And really, Anne's message is that preparedness can be joyful. We can connect, we can come together, we can have fun, and also do some important work to prepare for emergencies. And finally, we have Adam and Jasmine. Adam is emergency preparedness expert. We learned a lot from him over the course of our time together. But also, he hasn't connected with his neighbors in the past. So for him, that was very new as well. And he started by distributing resource sheets and 3D printed emergency whistle with some information, how to use it, why it's important. So as a gift, as an offering to his neighbors. And then they were able to organize summer barbecue, even though not very summery weather, but still people showed up, they had great time and started to build those connections. So over the course of 6 months, we reached over 400 residents in the two neighborhoods we worked in, and diverse neighbors from 1 to 80 plus, speaking different languages, different abilities, accessibility needs. And the buildings were quite a mix from co-ops that are known for having a strong sense of community and connection to independent living facilities and rentals that are notorious for being transient and lacking that sense of community. And of course, there were some challenges. People are busy, we know that. There was limited engagement from some folks, which is to be expected. And in some cases, strata or building management was not very supportive. But again, with a little bit of effort and consistency, that was able to, folks were able to overcome that. But overall, we raised awareness, we connected with neighbors, and we started building that trust and connection that will only help, will grow and will help to prepare and make communities resilient. And I would like to share also a few practical ideas for connection. It starts with saying hello and really starts with intention. You don't need a lot of resources or time. It's really starting connecting with your neighbors, saying hello, learning their name, and sharing kindness, whether it's cookies. I highly recommend sharing cookies over holiday season. Small favors. Everyone goes away over the summer, and watering plants or picking up mail is a very kind and generous offering that you can make. And communication channel. In our building, it was power outage that prompted everyone to set up a WhatsApp group. But right now we use it to exchange small favors or offer furniture to our neighbors. So it's a really great way to stay in touch. And neighbor social, whether it's party with a purpose or the purpose is to come together and connect, is a great way to bring neighbors together. And it could be a potluck, just putting a call out there to come and share some food, snacks, and get to know neighbors. And for the first time, only a few people may show up, but it just takes time and consistency. And as we say, the connections are built at the speed of trust. So it takes some time. It doesn't happen overnight. And preparing together is a great way to connect. So it's almost like chicken and an egg, what comes first. For some, people are excited to come together to have fun times over summer barbecue. But for others, preparedness is really, as Stacy calls Trojan horse, is a good reason for neighbors to start a conversation. But one really helps support the other. So the more you connect, the more you're prepared, and the more you work together, the more connected you become. So I really hope that you will take one small first step in getting to know your neighbors, in connecting and becoming a good neighbor and resilient community. So thank you very much. And this is my son here sharing cookies this past holiday season with our neighbors. So the tradition of connectedness continues and lives on. Thank you.
Thank you, Senia and Stacy. I've seen this material before, but I continue to be in awe of the work that you've accomplished and the simplicity of the premise, how it not only prepares people, but it enriches their lives. And I think excellent advice. Kids and cookies, always ideal icebreakers. So well done. That's an easy takeaway. I also want to extend my gratitude to Senya, Stacy, and for everyone who attended. Some really wonderful questions in the chat and some food for thought for Prepared BC as we embark on supporting more initiatives like this with our provincial program. I was a little bit late getting my mic unmuted, but on the screen now are QR codes to each of the programs that you heard from tonight. Prepared BC, we have a multitude of guides, including a neighborhood guide that can be used as an icebreaker if you're planning to host a party. We also have contact information and website links to Building Resilient Neighborhoods and Good Neighbor Kitsilano. Stacy and Ksenia are very generous with their time, and I'm sure if you reached out directly to both organizations, they could answer any questions and give you ongoing advice. So, with gratitude, thank you, everyone, and I hope you continue to have a happy Emergency Preparedness Week. This is a great way to bookend it. Take good care.